Thank you, Lisa. This is Reset here on 91.5 WBEZ. I am Justin Kaufmann. Most of Chicago's downtown bridges were up again last night from 9 till 6 this morning, part of Mayor Lightfoot's response to looting that took place in and around the Loop early Monday morning. If this were any other year, think of the massive logjam that would cause. No trains, no buses, no expressway ramps, no bridges. It would take hours to get downtown. But we're still in the throes of this pandemic, and far fewer people are moving around the city. As a result, ridership on the CTA, Metra, and Pace are down about 70% compared to this time last year. Now, funding for public transportation is based on ridership, and it can be hard enough to make ends meet when buses and trains are full. So what does the future look like when our regional transit system is taking such a big hit from COVID-19? Joining me now, Kirk Dillard, chairman of the Regional Transportation Authority. That's the agency that oversees Metra, the CTA, and Pace buses. Chairman Dillard, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Justin. It's good to be with you.
Yeah, good to talk with you. So this is something that we have been talking about for the last couple of months, just about the fact that ridership is down. As you look at, we started this in March, and we're now in August. Is it dire? I mean, where are we? How's the RTA responding to such a drastic drop in ridership?
Well, we are adapting and innovating like everyone else during this COVID culture. We have the transit agencies, CTA, Metra, and Pace, have created a culture of COVID prevention. And all riders should know that the trains and the buses have never, ever been cleaner in their history. In fact, I just tell folks, I just let my children ride Metra and the CTA, the last couple of weeks. So I'm putting my own children on there. But transit's crucial. As Greg Hines wrote a piece this week in Cranes, his headline was Chicago's RX for post-COVID recovery, healthy transit. Mm-hmm. We move over 2 million riders a day. That is 1/6 of the population of Illinois, and 70% of those who work in the central business district in Chicago, which is where your highest incomes come from to feed our treasury, which funds our schools and police and fire and other services. 70% of those folks take mass transit to work. And, in the last decade, 50% of all new jobs created in our area were within a half a mile of mass transit. Mm-hmm. 85% of all new commercial construction was within a half a mile of mass transit. And for affordable housing or multifamily housing starts, 76% of all multifamily housing starts were within a 10-minute walk of a CTA or Metra stop. So, our economy in metropolitan Chicago is built around one of our strengths, which is mass transit. And our system's safe. You got to wear a mask until there's a vaccine. You're going to have to wear a mask. You're going to have to wash your hands and sanitize like you do anywhere else, and you socially distance. But we're safe, and we have never, ever been physically cleaner than we are. And anyone that rides the CTA, I looked at a site this morning on transitchicago.com. Their webpage will show you how we clean our trains and L trains and buses.
But it's interesting because as someone who rides all of everything you just said. I mean, I'm a Metro guy. I've done the CTA, Pace as well. I think that my point of view would be that I would think that you guys have done all the necessary precautions. The question is just that my commute has changed. The question is that I don't necessarily go into work anymore. Whether it's my shop downtown decided to close up, or maybe they're okay with keeping me at home until the foreseeable future. So it's less about whether or not people are feeling safe on the ride. It's whether or not they even need to take it anymore.
Yep, and we're going to innovate. And we've been seeing declining ridership where, I'm a guy that probably works at home now 1 day a week. 15 years ago, I never would have worked at home. So we know that the American workforce was changing already. We partner with Uber and Lyft and Divvy. We're being more innovative. We use sometimes smaller and cleaner buses. And we constantly monitor, how our ridership partnership is to to save taxpayers and riders money, yet providing some of the best transit service anywhere in the world. So we're innovative, we're nimble. I will say both Dorval Carter, the president of the CTA, as well as the executive director of the RTA, Leanne Redden, are both very active nationally in the American Public Transportation Association, and we are constantly working with San Francisco, Philadelphia, New York, London, and the other major transit systems to be as innovative as we can. And we're going to be nimble, we're going to be innovative, and I know that the CTA and Metra and the RTA, we're working with Jack Lavin from the Chicagoland Chamber of Commerce, the State Chamber, looking to at working hours as we go back into a more full regiment in after Labor Day, and looking to see if we can have some staggered hours to keep social distancing easier.
So you'd see staggered hours on Metro or CTA or PACE just based on the fact of what they think the new commute is?
And asking businesses if it's possible to stagger their hours. It's interesting, during the Olympics in Atlanta, they work staggered hours just until we get a vaccine and we get back, to make sure we have the social distancing space on mass transit.
Chairman Dillard, I don't want to cut you off, but that's such an. I've been preaching about the idea that the who's not at the table is the private sector. When you're talking about whether it's schools or whether it's transportation or whether other issues or even the idea of unemployment, it's this idea of how do you engage and how do you get the private sector to be a part of the conversation. And to hear you talking to the chambers about staggered hours, that's exactly that.
And it's the retail merchants. I always tell folks, how do you think, if you live in the suburbs, who do you think works at Yorktown Mall or Oak Brook Mall or Old Orchard? Those folks take, they take PACE and they take mass transit. We're also running more reverse commutes. We have a Sunrise Express that leaves, if you want to live in Fulton Market, as a millennial and live the life in the city, but you have to work on the North Shore, either at one of the great pharmaceutical laboratories up there. We run a reverse commute called the Sunrise Express, so you can live downtown or live near North and get a fast commute nonstop to Waukegan every morning. So we've got to be innovative. We are working with the private sector constantly. We have great partners, and Jack Lavin is from the Chicagoland Chamber, one of our biggest cheerleaders that we have for mass transit.
I love to hear that. Chairman of the Regional Transportation Authority, Kirk Dillard, is with us. This is the agency that oversees Metro, the CTA, and PACE buses. Talked to you extensively over the last couple of years about transportation funding. And having to go to not just the state, but to Congress or to Washington, D.C. to get funding. And that's when you were full, right? And a lot of that had to do with maintenance, modernizing the fleet, whether that has to do with the CTA trains, buses, or Metra. When you're in a situation like this where the priorities have shifted to just being able to give us the service, what does that do for the fleet? What does it do for all the things that you've been asking for when it's not a pandemic?
Well, hopefully, and I commend Governor Pritzker and the legislature, we finally, after a decade of no capital or infrastructure funding, have a massive state infrastructure program, and that money is flowing. I worry about sales taxes, because sales taxes are really the lifeblood, along with the fares that we all pay to ride Metro, CTA, and PACE. So sales taxes are down a little bit, but the state's been a great partner recently. But we need to keep up our infrastructure, which had fallen in great disrepair. We had a backlog of state of good repair, as it's called, of nearly $30 billion, and the state helps plug that hole. We need, as we watch the presidential election and the congressional elections go forward, we'd certainly need, and you've seen Donald Trump go back and forth with Speaker Pelosi about a national infrastructure plan. The president was talking about $2 trillion, but that's just never come to fruition. We clearly need a federal plan. After whomever the next president is, we need a federal bill to supplement the state infrastructure plan to keep our system running well. But it's been really, Justin, for a couple of years or a few years, I've been the chairman of the RTA. We have been focused on infrastructure spending from Springfield, and now suddenly it's just a total shift to let's think about how we keep the system afloat operationally. We did get about $1.5 billion, a one-time infusion from the Federal CARES Act. We've just sent a letter to our congressional delegation, along with all our counterparts in mass transit nationally, asking for some more assistance nationwide, and hopefully we will get that, and that'll keep us afloat. But we're clearly looking at probably losing over a year's period about $900 million in operational revenue.
I guess the question I ask is the same I ask of our tax collectors or our tax assessors, or the same question I ask of our political leaders. The climate is, if you just basically look at how, economy works, if there are less demand, the prices go up. So are we going to expect a price hike when it comes to the CTA, the Metro, the Pace bus, even in the middle of a pandemic?
I doubt that, and I don't set those fares. They're set by the CTA, Pace, and Metro. But we certainly realize what our economic situation is of our riders, many of whom have been furloughed or laid off. So we're very sensitive about fare hikes, especially at this time. And we're going to avoid that at all costs. We're doing things to cut costs, and we're trying to be innovative and avoid that at all costs.
I'm amazed, and we're talking with Chairman Kirk Dillard from the RTA about the local transit and the health of local transit, whether it's CTA, Metro, or Pace. Because think about just a year ago, I was reading stories about how if you're on the West Line going out to Aurora on the Metro, that is just packed, right? You can't get on that train. There's so many people that are coming, right? You know that. Yeah, that's the line you're on. I know. The idea that there was questions about how can the RTA, how can Metro add more trains? How can you change and shift the way that schedules work so more trains are available for more commuters? To think in a snap of a finger that here we are, not even 12 months later from that conversation, thinking much differently about transit. So as you at the top of the RTA, how do you approach it? How do you deal with that when these movements are slow and now you have to move fast?
We are very good. We have tremendous people at the helm of, I think Dorval Carter is the best operator nationally of any mass transit system. Jim Derwinski's a veteran at the head of Metra, and Rocky Donahue is just a tremendous leader at Pace. They have great boards, and they have tremendous staff. And just like our first responders, our transit folks, whether it is, having to suspend service, sadly, to the Loop on a Sunday night and a Monday morning, our folks have been on the front lines. These operators and the people that work for CTA, Metra, and Pace have really been under immense stress. Even though there's fewer riders, they've been nimble, and they are putting in immensely long hours during this pandemic. But we have a great system in place. We have the lowest operating cost historically per mile of any mass transit system in the United States. So I always tell folks, sometimes Chicago and Illinois politics is not the most efficient. We have the lowest operating cost per mile. I think we have the best system, and we're going to continue to innovate, and we're very involved nationally. So we are in constant communication, looking for ideas from any other mass transit system in the world. But we also lead, and will continue to lead, as in other cities constantly look to Chicago. We're the first in the country on our subways, where you have, you've got 4 or 5G service underground. No one else had that, and it was all paid for by the private sector. So it didn't cost our riders or taxpayers anything. So we continue to be the leader, and we need to innovate. And I encourage any listener that's out there that has ideas to shoot me, shoot Dorval Carter, shoot anybody who's in the transit business, their ideas, because we're always we're all in this together for innovation.
Okay, Chairman Dillard, when we think about public transportation, a lot of essential workers, frontline workers, people who don't have the luxury of working from home, they're going to use the service. And they're going to use a PACE bus, like you said. They might use the CTA or Metro. How do you make sure that when there have to be cuts, or there have to be staggered schedules, or there have to be rider just changes, how do you make sure that it's equitable?
Well, we are constantly, and it starts at the top, and Mayor Lightfoot, as well as Tony Preckwinkle, the Cook County Board Chairman, are constantly preaching equity. I tell folks that the economic equalizer, and we've seen protests, and there's been a lot of discussion about inequities in our society. Mass transit is the economic equalizer of our area. You can live in any neighborhood in Chicago and generally be able to go any place where there is decent employment. We've got to do better. But if you look at the new 95th Street station, helps Chicago State University, but that is the largest piece of infrastructure investment on the south side in ages. It looks like an airport, not a transit stop. So we are constantly trying to move our resources into affected areas. We are running what I call shadow buses behind some of the busier buses for safety in Chicago. And those routes are like the number 79 bus and number 4 Cottage Grove. So these are what I call neighborhood routes. They're not for, the well-heeled that work downtown Chicago. And transit is the great economic equalizer. And we plan with the mayor to make transit a real component in the way we revitalize our neighborhoods, which helps everything, including reducing crime.
Kirk Dillard, the chairman of the Regional Transportation Authority. Always a pleasure to have you on the program. Thanks for speaking to us. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Jason, and thanks for your interest in mass transit. We really appreciate it.